Back by popular demand, welcome back to the chat room. My name is Amantle Nsala and I will be your host for today. This is a chat room where we dive into the dynamic world of young people, where we look at multiple topics from career development to what we expect in the future. Today's topic is diversity and inclusion. As always, I am not alone. I'm with a new partner in crime. His name is Loago Saleshando. A background story, I'm going to tell this wherever I go. Okay. I've asked Loago to come to my shows 3 times. Has he not let me down 3 times? So finally, sir, thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you for coming this one time.
Okay, fine. That's what we're going to do to each other now.
Loago, I tried to look for your LinkedIn, your Instagram. It says that you are the owner of LATANGO. And you are also the SRC president. SRC president, I do know of BAC. However, just tell me a bit about LATANGO. What is it?
Okay, that's actually a really good question. LATANGO is my firstborn child, my very own digital marketing agency, where we take over clients' social media accounts and essentially turn them into revenue-generating tools. So instead of them pointlessly posting, we're going to post them. We're going to post for them with greater purpose, with the eventual goal of making them money through Facebook.
Are we looking at like monetizing their?
Not through monetizing, rather through lead generation, which is collecting data of potential customers and then using that data to reach out to them and get them to come through the door. That's the most lucrative tool that we have to make sure that these guys have very profitable digital marketing. So that's what LATANGO deals with, the social media, digital marketing space of businesses.
I think then our topic for today is perfect for you because we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and I do know that you're the BAC SRC Youth President and you're also the owner of LATANGO. So obviously, if you're into the digital marketing space, we also have to adhere to, how is our audience? Are we inclusive of the whole audience? And we're talking about how diverse is your marketing, how inclusive is it, right? So let's just start with those terms right there.
Okay.
When we talk about diversity or just like inclusivity, what are we looking at there? What are the what's the spectrum?
Okay. Well, with diversity, we'll look at definitions, sort of. Diversity, we're looking at, I'm not going to give you the Google definition because I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Diversity, we're looking at the having various different types of people, essentially. If you have a diverse organization, you've got people of different, for simplicity's sake, I'll say different types of people of different sexual orientations, socioeconomic backgrounds, genders, races, religions, sexes, everything. And that's diversity, variety of peoples, not having one person. Inclusivity would then be I don't want to use the word inclusion, but the meaningful contribution of these people. Inclusion is needed for you to realize the benefits of diversity, essentially, right? So you can have a whole bunch of people of different types and say we're a diverse organization, but if they're not actively participating meaningfully, then there's no inclusion, which then defeats the purpose of having diversity. So that's a quick look into my understanding, which is correct, of the terms at hand.
Perfect. No, actually, when we talk about inclusion, I remember this one time I went for, I believe it was like a speaking engagement, right? And someone just stood up and said, ladies and gentlemen, and then the LGBT community is like, that is not inclusive. We need gender neutral terms. And I think that's just like, it's true, we do need gender neutral terms, especially because our communities now, getting larger, so we definitely need to include them. But then what I just thought of now, since you're also just part of the digital community, is how exactly do we now maneuver around this expanding community? How do you aim to include people now on the spectrum of social media? Because I assume if we're in the room, it's easy to include, but in a situation where the room is literally the world, how do you do that?
Well, that's a pretty tough thing to do because now in this day and age, more than ever, we've got a lot of different types of things that you need to be socially aware of in terms of how you address people, because everyone is so different. How you go about maneuvering that through those issues through social media. What we do for our clients is that in the past, when a client wants to address we've had a client that did an ad campaign on Facebook for the whole country. But everyone would think, okay, post something in Setswana, you're good. No, but there's English-speaking people, there's Skalaka, there's CAE, there's a whole bunch of languages I didn't even know exist that people speak on in this country. And so it's to really have diversity in the content that you make to cater for these different people, talk the different talks, respect the different cultures. And you have to have a good understanding of who you're talking to, because marketing is essentially communication. How do you talk to the people that you want to reach? And so having that information about your target audience, really look at those demographics, helps you to navigate through this thing of addressing a lot of different types of people through social media, just to put it simply.
That's good. I think when it comes to also inclusion, we're now seeing it break down into also the idea of representation, right? Now, what I've realized is with representation, some people tend to change it into tokenism. That, okay, fine, if we're going to represent, we're just going to bring in maybe 2 people from that particular community. Those 2 people, though, do not really show that the community is represented. And so I just want to see, how do we actually fight this whole thing of representation and tokenism? How do we, maybe for lack of a better term, say, break it down and say, let's push for representation and not tokenism?
I would say that, okay, there's an issue that I think really we're only focusing on diversity and inclusion and all these things now. We're still at like baby stages of introducing it. Like, as you know, there's a huge problem of including maybe women in politics, as for like, that's only coming up now, but it's always been a problem. And so we're still in the infant stages of developing our inclusivity in society. Tokenism is when you have, by the way, for those who don't know, it's when you have diversity, but you have no inclusion of the people that you have within your organization, whatever it may be. So I may say we're diverse because here on this stage we've got a man and a woman, but only I am the star of the show. That's tokenism, because there's diversity, but she's not included. Now, how we go about, gosh, I completely forget what the original question was. I wanted to coach you.
How we go about diversity, no, actually, how do you go about representation and tokenism? However, let me just give you some time to breathe and just, think about it while we take a short break, ladies and gentlemen. This is the chat room. I'm with Loago Saleshando. See you in a bit. We're back at the chat room. I am with Loago Saleshando and we're discussing diversity and inclusion. So back to my question, I was talking about representation and tokenism, and you just told me what tokenism is. And we're talking about how exactly now do we differentiate between the two, and how do we stop the use of tokenism instead of representation? Okay,
perfect. Right now the problem is it's good enough to simply have diversity and have nothing forward after that. You don't have to show any proof of inclusivity of the diverse people that you have in whatever organization you're dealing with. And so step number 1 is to further put in structures in place to sort of, it can't just be good enough anymore to just have a diverse team or whatever it may be in the case. There has to be a way of saying, okay, but here's also how we can prove that everyone, representation is proportionate and was meaningful because we managed to allow them to contribute in this way, shape, or form. I hope I'm not speaking in a very abstract sense, but essentially because of how we're not so developed in our structures in place to really emphasize diversity today, it's only good enough just to have, and that's the biggest problem. It needs to be called out. People have to show what does that diversity bring. Sort of, right? We have to see inclusion and proof of that in all organizations, because, yeah, even me, I can do the same thing a lot of people do.
Yeah. So, I was actually watching this other show where we had one of the news reporters. She mentioned that she was fired from the show, particularly because she's Iranian, right? So she can't wear, I believe, her hijab, or I don't know. I'm sorry, don't crucify me. Yeah. So clearly there's lack of representation also in the media space. Now, I just want to ask, like, what do you think that particularly does, especially for marginalized groups? Because it's simple for us to think that, okay, like, but why does it matter to have maybe someone who's dark skinned, someone who's colored, and someone who's completely white to be representing in the show? Like, why do you think lack of representation really does to marginalized communities?
It's a very sad effect that it has on people. It's the same thing. For many years, Barbie dolls only came with as a white girls, you know, and then only later did the black dolls came out. It came with a lot of backlash, but I can't believe, you know, for a lot of girls, it must have been tough to think, okay, but this is the epitome of beauty, white, blonde hair, and all that. And it's a similar effect that it has on marginalized groups in the media space. They're not represented, and it sort of makes folks feel like, but it becomes foreign then to these groups to be in the spaces where they're not represented, right? You now shatter dreams. You don't allow people to think as big as one day I want to be a weather broadcaster on BTV. They can't think that far because it's never been seen before. And so it's quite demoralizing, and you know, it really affects how people move forward and people's aspirations and things of that nature.
I think particularly with that, we look at how like it's just merging also into the issue of mental health. You know, as we talk about even how the same thing with Barbie dolls, how they've been just the epitome of beauty standards, body standards are just, you know, being regulated by such small things such as a lack of representation. So obviously that also means that there's also like a lack of just concentrating on the whole ideology of mental health. So I just want to know, what support systems do you think can be put into place, especially to really push and address the issue of lack of representation?
Yeah, I think so. There's been a global initiatives. Like there's a 30% club, I think it's called, where organizations need to be part of the club. You need to have 30% of your workforce be females, for example. And quotas like that should be actually, I believe, signed into law. It should be part of the laws of countries that, you know, you can't just have an all-black men workforce. There should be certain quotas in place so that there's a guarantee of representation of some groups in all organizations. I think only then, because if you don't either use the law or incentivize, no one is really obliged to. This is a social issue that we cry about, but at an organizational level, do people really have to change if they don't want to? No, they have no reason to right now. So I think it should be signed into law so that there's really tough rules to have people better represented.
I think now let's just bring it back home. You are also the associate president for BAC. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
I just want to know, when we bring it back home, what challenges do you think have you faced, even in terms of, you know, pushing the whole narrative of diversity and inclusion, particularly in your area where you dominate?
Okay. To look at my campus, I hope we don't have to say the institution where I am.
Sorry.
But, for us, we've done a pretty good job. If you look at the SRC cabinet where I am, we have, I think it's 4 women out of 11 that were voted in, 3 or 4, which is, hey, we had no obligation to have that, but we did, and we managed. The challenges, though, that I feel like we have are not as dramatic. We don't have many challenges, to be honest, because we're pretty well represented, thanks to there being that structure that we put in place of having those 4 people in the leadership position on that campus. If I was to give one challenge in terms of representation, I would say it is more of representation at a managerial level. Remember, I'm SRC president, but then there's SRC, there's management, and the students. I'm the bridge in between. And so there's an issue of representation in key conversations had by management. That's the only challenge that we've had. Student representation in board meetings, say, for example. Otherwise, we do a pretty good job of making sure everyone is well represented.
Great. Let's just take it back to LATANGO, right? Just take me through your thought process when creating a digital marketing agency, because I don't know, I wouldn't expect you to have a
Yeah.
digital
Yeah, I
marketing
get you.
agency.
I
So
get
just
you.
take me through that.
Okay, this is actually this is fun. It was a difficult time for me, very very difficult time, and I needed some money, and I said, okay, let's go into business. I needed a business model that was going to allow me to operate with almost zero startup capital, and cash flow should have been very easy to get. And I needed a service-based business so that I also learned business skills along the way. If you go into product, you're detached from the clientele. So I went through service and I looked at YouTube, got the suggestion. Long story short, everything added up, and that's how I ended up forming LATANGO. To put a long story very, very short, I just had to make sure I ticked all those boxes so that I'm learning and I'm also...
Yeah. We're now delving into his journey with creating LATANGO and finally moving into being the SRT president of his institution. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's just take a quick breather. This is the chat room with Amantle and Loago. We're back at the chat room. Like I said, my name is Amantle Nsala and I am with the one and only Loago Saleshando. We are talking diversity and inclusion. Now we're just breaking into his journey at LATANGO, and I just wanted to ask a few questions now about your side of entrepreneurship. Let's talk about mentorship programs, right? Now, when it comes to young people, I do understand that there's a little bit of stigma in how exactly they are welcomed into the entrepreneurial side. Now, that's why I think we talk about whether they're included or not. Talk to me about the challenges that you found.
100%. It's difficult to own a business and try to do business with other business owners because you come in being as young as you are, and a lot of people, I think the average, gosh, I completely forget what the number is of the average age of a business owner in this country, but you're dealing with people with whole families, okay, and then you're talking to them about very serious proposals and things that you have to offer. It's very, very difficult sometimes to get through to them because in this country, we have a culture of age being respected, and if we don't have age on our side, so where does our respect come from?
I think it's the same as even with when companies now start looking for people to work, they say an experience of 10 years.
Right?
And you're wondering, huh?
It's really, really tough.
Yeah.
But I chose to have an approach of just, look, that might be the norm, whatever. I choose to be, I don't play by the same rules. See, I will be respected and I will go and demand it if it doesn't come to me. And so that's essentially what I did. Knocked on a lot of doors, made a lot of phone calls, sent emails like crazy, and had a lot of meetings and said crazy things in front of people who didn't expect me to say it. The biggest thing I found was just like, you have to tell yourself, I don't play by the same rules, you know? Fine, you respect age, I'm young, but I don't care. Like, we're gonna make this happen. And so I feel like that's a challenge I definitely had because of the culture of our society, but I think it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, after 1 or 2 clients that you acquire, you now have that experience that you can show, which people respect even more.
I think entrepreneurship on its own is already very hard. Now, when we say entrepreneurship led by marginalized communities, we're now entering a different world. Talk to me about how you think, especially as a young person, we could encourage entrepreneurship in marginalized communities.
I think, that's a really tough one, eh? I would say that, like I said, if organizations could just have these structures already in place, quotas, for example, those would help so much already to lower the entry, or the barrier of entry. As for what they can do as it stands without these structures being in place, I would say that if you are someone within a marginalized group and you have aspirations of being an entrepreneur, you just have to go kick that door down yourself, honestly, and pave the way for yourself. I would say in the space of entrepreneurship, young people, a little bit marginalized. But I went ahead and kicked that door down and said, I'm going to go through anyways.
Yeah.
And so I think it takes individual initiative to better the situation and foster a culture. Because, by the way, also, marginalized groups being in big positions is highly celebrated across the world. People want to see these things happen. I want to see those that have been downtrodden for the history of of time be uplifted. So it's about, I think, individual initiative and making that choice to.
You know, as you speak, I just remembered that entrepreneurs or just like businesses are never really into the whole advocacy thing, right? But obviously, as you also overcome some challenges, you need to open space for other people to, you know, get into the same industry without necessarily going through the same challenges that you went through. Now, how do we bridge the gap between advocacy and also entrepreneurship? Because I believe there's also just this narrative that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, mind your own business. If you realize that there's a loophole, mind your own business. Just keep it moving. But if we keep it moving, then we're going to keep on, you know, going through the same problems. So how do we bridge that gap?
That's true. I really, really do believe in structures and policies and things of that nature. I think if, as an example, if I manage to be the CEO of FNB and I'm not even 25, like I said, being youth, part of the youth is also, you're slightly marginalized when it comes to these things, you know, success in the corporate world, entrepreneurship, things of that nature. It's up to then those who make it there to also remember that there's others to bring up as well. And so once, say for example, maybe you're an entrepreneur, so you're already in an already existing organization and you're making big choices. It should be up to you also to then instill policies that allow the, like I said, the barrier of entry to be lesser for those who want to now follow. And for no marginalized groups, you have to realize that things are very difficult. And so there's a lot of people that to achieve anything right now are going to be pioneers of sorts. And so they really need to ensure that that path is cleared for those who are to come next. In the SRC, where I'm at, in the institution that I'm at, we've made changes to the constitution that we're governed by to also allow for easier, for that barrier of entry to be really deconstructed and for it to be easier for people to ascend to those leadership positions. So I really do believe that those inside knock that wall down from the inside so that others can come in, the goodwill.
Okay, no, that's good. Now let's talk about just advocacy as a whole, youth and advocacy. I think when we talk about advocacy, people tend to think that we're talking about your marching, your protest. In the digital age, how do you think advocacy has now transformed?
I think it is now, it's not so violent and hostile. There's very diplomatic advocacy as well. We have the beauty of social media. You literally have a canvas and you can do whatever you want with it, with your TikTok page, Instagram page, whatever it may be. And so you can take a look at my case and at my pages. I can very easily use my TikTok to advocate for whatever initiative I may be wanting to push or things of that nature. So in this day and age of social media, we've got those tools to leverage. We've got great reach on there. We should leverage these tools appropriately and not do the youth thing of, you know, not thinking twice about social media, post this and this and that, but rather use the reach to spread word about whatever you're advocating for in that sense. To put it very simply, just use what you have. We have free social media apps. We don't have to march anymore. We don't have to get shot by SSG.
Yeah.
Things are easy, right?
Yeah. Lara, thank you so much for joining us at the chat room. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Loago Saleshando. We were talking diversity and inclusion. Thank you for watching, and that is all.